Okay, so this is Sean's bike here, and we're looking at it, and we're going to put this bike into the jig and stretch out the steering head on it. Not because it's 1700ths of a degree short from what the template says, but what do we know? We know that the 05 GSXR 1000 seems to work a lot better than the 04, 05 GSXR 750. So when we take and go back to our select index data and scroll down to a GSXR 1000, an 05 model, and we tell it to measure Sean's bike against that, we see that when we look at it, we see that it's 8300ths of a degree shorter than the new bike. So what we're thinking is that by taking the bike, putting it into the jig and stretching it out about half a degree, we're hoping that that'll be within 3/10 of that, and that will cure a lot of our problems with our lack of trail. When we look, we see a lack of trail here, and we also see a pretty flat swing arm. We'd really like, on the new GSXR 1000, we're able to get somewhere around 13.5 degrees, 23.5 degrees, and 100 millimeters of trail with a 604 millimeter tall Dunlop tire and a set of clamps that are 30 millimeters in offset. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a half a degree to this bike so that we can get a swing arm downslope of somewhere around 12 and a half, get this back to 24 degrees, and get our trail number at 100. So we're going to actually make a cheater bike out of this bike. And we'll show you how we go through that step by step. And the next shot you'll see will be the bike in different states of installing the tooling into it to put it into the jig and to affect the changes. That's it. So in order to put this bike into the jig, in order to make a straightening move or a correction move to it, or in this case to pull the steering head out so that we can increase our swing arm downslope and still have the rake that we wish to have, what we need to do is adapt it to the jig. And by the horizontal axis of that is accomplished by taking out the swing arm pivot that you see there and replacing it with this steel shaft. This is a hardened steel shaft. I sell these out of my shop. I have a new lathe to make these up. What I do is I make these out of 17-4 stainless steel, machine them, have them heat treated, and then go through and have them ground after that. And they're about 40 Rockwell, which is 40% as hard as a diamond, which is about 25 times stronger than they really need to be. And by doing that, you don't really need to brace the frame a lot. A lot of guys have adapters that just fit on where this nut would fit on or on the other side, and they use the standard swing arm pivot shaft. I don't do that. I change it out with this. The people that have the regular piece that adapts to this, that part of it is much quicker than the way I do it because they simply unscrew this and screw the other piece on. But they're always having to take things out as far as the motor mounts go and mount the bike with that because they don't really have that much integrity in their tooling, which is different than the way I do it. I guess there's really no right or wrong, but that's just the way I do it. The other thing that we do is we're going to take off the fork, obviously, and we're going to hook this assembly into it, and this will sit just about like this, and you'll see this in the jig in a couple of minutes. And what we do is we take out the standard steering head bearing, which is 5 millimeters tall and 55 millimeters in diameter, and we replace it with this. So we would pull out the standard one and drive this bushing down in there so that we have a great deal of purchase area on the bushing itself or on the steering head itself so that we don't deform that any more than we have to, and we have a nice tight fit when we're done. Alright, so what we've got now is we've got the front fork assembly moved, and I don't know if you can see it over there or not, but we removed it just by taking the top clamp off. The top clamp's still on the bike, clip-ons are right here, and all of that's in an effort to not do any more work than you really need to do because we're selling this thing. It's not that competitive to sell these jobs, but what's the sense of spending an extra hour if you don't need to? So now what we're going to do is we're going to insert the steering head bushings where the bearings were, and we're going to change out the swing arm pivot with the tooling that we have. Whenever you're working on these frames, grease is a real good friend of yours, and you really want to make sure that you take the extra time to grease some stuff up, because ultimately if this thing starts galling that up rather than just going in, that's a big problem. And why create any more work for yourself than you have to? Here's a soft hammer. Bottom one in now. Try to get this nice and straight. Okay, we're going to go ahead and take the swing arm pivot out now. If you see underneath the bike right here, you see that we have a jack underneath here, and the reason why the jack's important is so that we can lightly support the bike. If you look over, I'm doing it with one finger. I'm going to put this back in because I forgot to grease this. So we're going to go ahead and grease this up. And then we're also going to put grease on the threads. The shafts have threads on them just like the Suzuki does, the Suzuki swing arm pivot, so that the bike basically knows no difference between being in the jig and when the swing arm pivot's in it. So we go ahead and pull this out now. Jiggle this around a little bit. Okay, great. So that's in. We're going to start the threads by hand here. Okay, very good. So I'm going to go ahead and drive that in, and we'll talk to you later when we have the bike up in the air. Oh, excuse me, when we're putting the front end on it. So that'll be all for now. All right. So we have our swing arm pivot shaft in, and all that's left to do on this side is to find a spacer that will space the mounting piece of the jig out far enough so that we don't touch the frame. And we're going to go ahead and install our tooling into the front piece. So this is the shaft that we use. This fits through the bottom of this. This is our spacer, which increases our leverage. And then we stick this through here. Okay, so we slide this through. Then we put one of our bushings on the top. Then our other plate. Down the other bushing, and then our threaded piece that holds the shaft in position goes on, and then that's that. Then we would set our washers up on top, and then thread our nuts down. The reason we have so much extra all thread on here is because you never know from one day to the next which bike you're actually going to be straightening. So it's important to leave as much versatility in this as you can. Okay, so all we need to do now is make sure that we're on, everything's about where we want it. We'll wait till we're actually in the jig to make sure everything's tight and do the double check on it. But at this point, we're ready to grab our cherry picker and load the bike into the jig. So we'll do that now.